Labor leader Chris Hipkins has done a U-turn and put capital gains and wealth taxes potentially back on the table for Labor. How will that go down with the voters? Let's find out. Chris Hipkins is here. Good morning. Nice to see you.
Good morning.
At that meeting you had yesterday, did you talk about your captain's calls over the wealth tax, the CGT, that kind of stuff?
Well, what I said was, I think, we need to now take stock of the fact that we lost the election, and we need to come back in 2026 with a refreshed lineup and a refreshed policy platform, and that's exactly what we'll do. And that means that, we start again. So things that we had, that we campaigned on, clearly we weren't elected based on those policies, and so we'll start again. And that means looking again at things that weren't part of our promise for 2023, and it also means that those things that were part of our 2023 promises might not be in 2026. The world will be very different 3 years from now. The country will be different 3 years from now, and so we'll need to have a refreshed policy as we head into that election.
Is it not a bit of a credibility issue for you, though, because you said with the wealth tax, the CGT, that kind of stuff, you said no, not while you're leader, even after the election?
Well, that was, of course, on the basis that we would win the election, and we didn't. I was really clear.
You didn't say that, though, did you?
Since, well,
you didn't say
well,
if
no,
we lose,
actually,
unless we lose.
If you go back and you look at what I said at the time, I said my approach as leader has always been to commit for 3-year electoral cycles. I've never been in the never, never, never camp, and I don't intend to start being in that. But I have been clear on tax. But I've been very clear on tax that when we make a commitment at the election, which we did at the last election, if we're elected, we'll stick to it, and until the next election, and then we'll make commitments at the next election. And so we didn't win this election. So now we've got to go back and we've got to say, OK, well, what's our platform going to be for 2026?
All right. Is Kelvin Davis going to resign? He said that he would if he didn't win his seat.
That'll be a question for Kelvin. He's indicated to me, and I think he indicated publicly yesterday, that he's going to take stock over the summer. Up until a few days ago, he was still winning his electorate seat, and obviously the special votes have changed that for him. So he's going to take some time to have a think about that. But he had already indicated that this was going to be his last term in Parliament regardless. Yeah.
Is it fair on the New Zealand taxpayer that people take the summer to think about their future? It doesn't sound like they're particularly engaged.
Oh, no, absolutely not. I think it's a very reasonable thing. When you lose an election, people will take stock. And when you've just lost your constituency seat, I think people will take stock as well.
Will he be working?
All MPs continue to work over the summer, but MPs are also entitled to a break. It's been a busy year. I'd expect all of our MPs to be taking a bit of a break. They're entitled to a holiday as well.
Grant, I mean, you read between the lines, Grant's probably going to leave. Who are you thinking for finance?
I'm not going to. Good, nice try, but I'm not going to do a portfolio reshuffle live on here. Exciting though that may be for your viewership, but we'll take some time to take stock, and then I'm also not going to be doing our reshuffle until we've seen what the new government looks like,
which I think is fair.
We'll want to match up and see what they're doing first.
We may have a new foreign minister by Sunday, though, because their ministerial warrants run out on Saturday, and any MP who didn't get back into Parliament can't continue as a minister, and that includes Nanaia Mahuta. So do you have an idea of who, should there be no government by Saturday, who you might need to reallocate foreign affairs to? Because that's quite important at the moment.
Look, in the event that we're still the caretaker government next week, I'll reallocate that portfolio on a caretaker basis. It won't be someone who's making substantive decisions. Any decisions that we take in the foreign affairs portfolio at the moment are taken by me, the foreign minister, and the leader of the opposition, and that will continue. There may be a temporary foreign affairs minister added into that mix in the meantime, if that's where we get to. But ultimately, that depends on how quickly Christopher Luxon can pull his team together.
Let's talk about Gaza and the situation there for a second, because when you first announced New Zealand's support for Israel defending itself, it was on the basis that it was done within the bounds of humanitarian law. We've had Professor Robert Patman on the show this morning. He says that he thinks that qualification has slipped. Do you think that support, does that support still hold, and do you think that Israel is upholding humanitarian law?
That ultimately is a matter for the International Criminal Court to determine. New Zealand's been very clear in our position in terms of what we're looking for. We want there to be a pause in hostilities. We want to make sure that humanitarian access is available there to Gaza. We want to make sure that people who are leaving Gaza can do so safely. We want to make sure that there are safe zones within Gaza that are protected from the conflict so that people have somewhere to shelter. It's actually a very small area that we're talking about. Gaza is not a big territory. And so, we've set out our position, and that is the position that I also have to be clear about this, given we are in the caretaker period. That's the position that's agreed by both the outgoing and the incoming New Zealand governments. Any change to that position has to be agreed by both outgoing and incoming governments during this caretaker period.
Have you received any advice on whether Israel is acting within humanitarian law, but within the bounds of humanitarian law, or have you not received any advice on that?
As I have indicated, that's a matter for the international bodies who have jurisdiction over that. So the International Criminal Court, for example, if they were breaching international humanitarian law, that would be a matter for them.
So, the question is, have you had any advice on that from your officials?
Not specifically on that matter, other than what I have just said, which is that New Zealand's approach in these matters typically has not been to appoint ourselves judge and jury, but to support international processes such as the International Criminal Court.
Have officials flagged with you then concern about the conduct of Israel in Gaza right now?
Well, I think we're concerned, New Zealand is concerned about the conflict overall. We're very concerned about the fact that there are civilians being caught up in this conflict. We are very concerned about the way Hamas initiated the conflict, taking hostages, taking civilian hostages, and we are obviously concerned about the way the conflict is unfolding. But beyond that, I'm not in a position to go further in a comment on behalf of New Zealand on that at this point.
Willie Jackson talking about civil unrest and, quote, going to war with the ACT Party and the National Party over a potential referendum. Are you okay with that language? You're 100% happy and comfortable with that?
I'd be incredibly concerned if we end up with a referendum on the treaty. I think it would be incredibly divisive for New Zealand. I don't think Willie Jackson's been saying that that's what he wants. I think what he's been indicating is that a referendum would be incredibly divisive, that there would be an incredibly strong backlash against it. And I hope that
the new government okay with him using the phrase
to go down that road?
Going to war. Are you 100% comfortable with the way that he is talking about going to war? It's hardly parliamentarian.
Well, I mean, I think when you've got a potential incoming minister and an incoming government talking about extinguishing rights that have been established for over 180 years, I think that is going to provoke a very strong response.
Hang on, that's misinformation. Chris, that's misinformation. They're not talking about extinguishing rights. They are talking about asking a question to define the principles of the treaty in law. That may potentially enhance the rights. So are you not using a bit of misinformation there for people?
David Seymour's policy is effectively to remove all reference to the treaty from New Zealand law. I think that is something that's going to provoke quite a backlash.
All right. Chris Hipkins, the Labour leader, with us this morning. Thanks very much for your time. It's just gone 8 o'clock.